James Carter had always been a man of order and routine. Living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, he prized the little things that made life predictable: a neatly mowed lawn, a mailbox aligned perfectly with the curb, and a schedule that rarely deviated. He worked as an IT consultant, solving complex problems for clients by day and returning home to the comfort of familiarity by night. The Homeowners Association, HOA, had been a minor irritation over the years: letters about slightly crooked fences, newsletters reminding residents to maintain flower beds, and occasional small fines, but nothing James couldn't manage. He paid his dues on time, followed the rules, and believed that as long as he stayed within the lines, his life would remain peaceful. That peace, however, began to crack subtly when a new HOA board took over. Unlike the previous administration, these board members were rigid and increasingly petty, enforcing rules with an almost aggressive zeal. James noticed the change first in small ways: a letter criticizing the angle of his satellite dish, a warning about seasonal decorations, and an inspection notice implying that his property was non-compliant. Neighbors whispered about favoritism and subtle intimidation, but James didn't let gossip dictate his life. Instead, he methodically began documenting every communication, carefully filing letters and photographing any questionable notices. While others in the community might have reacted with anger or fear, James's approach was cautious and deliberate. He trusted the law and his own meticulous record-keeping to protect him if things escalated. Despite his careful vigilance, tension in the neighborhood was palpable. The board's tone became increasingly hostile, with suggestions of involving law enforcement over minor infractions. Casual conversations with neighbors revealed that others had also received veiled threats or unexpected visits, hinting at a deeper pattern of intimidation. Yet James remained composed. He spent evenings reviewing HOA covenants and municipal codes, ensuring he knew precisely what the board could and could not do. He even installed security cameras around his property, not because he anticipated immediate danger, but as a precaution, a way to maintain control in an environment growing less predictable by the day. By the end of the month, James could feel an undercurrent of unease settling over the community, like static before a storm. He didn't yet know that the HOA's petty rules would escalate into something far more serious, something that would challenge his composure and force him to take decisive action. What he did know was that he would not be caught unprepared. His patience, attention to detail, and commitment to legality were quietly forming the foundation for a defense that would soon be tested in a confrontation unlike anything he had faced before. The morning started like any other, with the faint hum of the air conditioner and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting through James Carter's kitchen. He was reviewing his emails when the unmistakable rumble of an unfamiliar vehicle pulled into his driveway. Peering out the window, he noticed two men in dark polos stepping out of an unmarked SUV. Their demeanor was confident, almost rehearsed, and they carried what appeared to be official-looking badges clipped to their belts. James's first instinct was caution. He had studied the HOA's overreach carefully, but nothing in his meticulous preparation had prepared him for a confrontation that looked like law enforcement at his own front door. The men identified themselves as conducting a welfare check on a reported disturbance at his property. James, immediately suspicious, asked to see formal identification and verification of their jurisdiction. One of the men flashed the badge again, its metallic sheen catching the morning light, and insisted they were authorized to enter. His wife, standing behind him, tensed, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. James calmly stepped forward, positioning himself between the men and the threshold. He told them that no one would enter without proper paperwork, emphasizing that he knew his rights. His voice was firm, yet measured. He refused to escalate the situation with confrontation, instead relying on careful observation and logic. The encounter lasted nearly 20 minutes. The men attempted to pressure James, alternating between persuasive language and veiled threats, but he held firm, filming the interaction discreetly on his phone. The smallest details caught his attention: inconsistent badge numbers, incorrect procedural language, and the subtle hesitations in their responses. These small irregularities, almost imperceptible to an untrained observer, confirmed James's growing suspicion that these were not legitimate law enforcement officers. When the men finally departed, leaving behind a handwritten report purportedly from the HOA, James immediately secured the footage and began annotating every detail. After the SUV disappeared around the corner, a tense silence settled over the house. James and his wife exchanged glances, both aware of the gravity of the situation. They discussed what had just occurred, carefully weighing what could be done next. James decided against reacting impulsively. Instead, he contacted a few trusted neighbors who had experienced similar incidents, sharing the footage discreetly and comparing notes. The picture that began to emerge was alarming. These checks were not isolated events but part of a deliberate pattern, orchestrated by the HOA to intimidate residents. By evening, James had transformed suspicion into determination. He realized that this incident was not merely a confrontation at the door but a signal of escalating aggression from the HOA, a prelude to more serious incursions. By the following week, the marina had become a quiet battlefield. Ethan's report had set official wheels in motion, and he was prepared to let the process unfold. But Karen, as usual, had no idea what she was up against. Her smug confidence had convinced her that Ethan was just another polite neighbor who would swallow his frustration. It started with witnesses. An older couple who lived across the dock mentioned they had seen Karen near the boat the previous evening. She was muttering about teaching him a lesson, Mrs. Hayes recalled, shaking her head. Another neighbor, a teenager with a phone constantly recording everything, came forward with footage. In it, Karen could be seen carrying a bucket toward the dock at night, pausing to glance around before approaching the Mariner's Pride. Ethan, calm as ever, passed the evidence to his Coast Guard contacts. They cross-referenced timestamps, trajectories, and even the chemical traces on the dock. Every detail matched his meticulous documentation. In a matter of days, what had seemed like a prank or a minor annoyance transformed into undeniable proof of intentional tampering with maritime property. When investigators approached Karen, she faltered. At first, she tried to feign ignorance. "I was just walking by. I didn't touch the boat," she insisted, her voice trembling. But the evidence was overwhelming. The detergent traces were a match to her cleaning supplies. The footprints aligned with the shoes she regularly wore. The video clearly showed her in proximity to the boat during the time the lines were loosened. Her composure cracked. In a voice tinged with panic, she admitted, though reluctantly, that she had approached the boat that night. "I didn't mean to damage it," she cried. "I just wanted to loosen the ropes a little. He's so uptight with that old boat." The admission shocked the marina staff and neighbors alike. Her actions, which she had considered a harmless retaliation for perceived slights, were now legally serious. Vandalizing a vessel could have resulted in injury or even sinking. Her recklessness had not only destroyed property but had endangered lives. Ethan watched quietly, his expression unreadable. He felt no joy in her panic. Justice, he knew, wasn't about satisfying personal anger. It was about accountability, about ensuring that actions had consequences. Karen's carefully constructed persona of control and superiority was crumbling around her, and for the first time, she realized that the quiet, unassuming man she had dismissed was someone who wouldn't let her slide by. For Ethan, the stage was set. The evidence was in place. And Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the marina, was about to learn just how serious consequences could be when the law and the Coast Guard got involved. The day of the scheduled meeting arrived with an almost surreal calm. James Carter prepared his home as if for a formal inspection, though this was no ordinary encounter. His security cameras were active, phones fully charged, and a trusted neighbor positioned discreetly to act as a witness. His attorney's instructions were clear: remain composed, never provoke, and gather indisputable evidence. James's meticulous preparation had turned his home into a stage for accountability, and he knew that any misstep could compromise the opportunity to expose the imposters. Shortly after mid-morning, the familiar SUV rolled slowly down the street and stopped in James's driveway. The two men emerged, badges gleaming, demeanor rehearsed. This time, James felt no panic, only a quiet resolve. He greeted them politely but firmly, immediately asking for badge numbers, departmental affiliations, and official paperwork. The men hesitated. One stammered, fumbling for words, while the other kept glancing toward his partner as if seeking silent guidance. James, recording everything, allowed the silence to build pressure. Each hesitation, each inconsistency, was captured in high-definition clarity on his phone. As the encounter unfolded, the imposters attempted to assert authority, claiming they were acting on behalf of law enforcement. James's attorney, who was on a conference call via speakerphone, calmly interjected, requesting verification. When pressed for official contact information, the men faltered, eventually making a call not to their supposed agency, but to a member of the HOA board. James's neighbors signaled subtly to local police, who, by pre-arrangement, were monitoring the situation. Within minutes, uniformed officers arrived, not to arrest James, but to investigate the individuals claiming to be officers. The impostor's facade crumbled under scrutiny. Under questioning, one of the men admitted they were contracted by the HOA board to intimidate residents and gather reports on compliance. Bank records, later reviewed by authorities, revealed payments from the HOA to a private security consultant, confirming that the HOA's leadership had orchestrated the scheme. The officers documented the entire incident, and James's recordings provided a supplemental layer of evidence, creating a clear, undeniable record of impersonation, intimidation, and conspiracy. By the end of the day, the trap had worked precisely as planned. The HOA's covert intimidation tactics had been exposed publicly, leaving the impostors facing potential criminal charges and the HOA board under intense scrutiny. James's careful planning, legal foresight, and calm execution had turned what could have been a dangerous confrontation into an overwhelming victory for accountability and justice. He had anticipated fear and chaos but replaced them with preparation and clarity, demonstrating that careful strategy and adherence to the law could neutralize even the most audacious attempts at. The aftermath of the confrontation was both sobering and transformative. James Carter watched as the consequences of the HOA's actions rippled through the neighborhood. Within days, the county issued citations against the impostors for impersonating law enforcement and engaging in intimidation. Investigators scrutinized the HOA's finances and contracts, uncovering irregularities that confirmed James's suspicions. The board had deliberately orchestrated the harassment of residents using a private security consultant as a proxy. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, exposing a leadership that had abused its authority under the guise of regulation. For James, the outcome was not about vindication or personal glory. He had never sought the spotlight. His aim had been simple: protection for himself, his family, and his neighbors. Yet, the careful documentation, legal planning, and calm execution of the trap had made him a quiet hero in the eyes of those affected. Neighbors who had once whispered anxiously about the board now came forward, sharing their own experiences and supporting petitions to recall the corrupt members. The HOA's grip on the community weakened as transparency and accountability began to take hold, proving that deliberate, patient strategy could overcome intimidation and fear. Local media covered the story, highlighting James's methodical approach and adherence to the law. He appeared in interviews not to boast, but to educate others about the importance of preparation, documentation, and legal guidance when facing harassment from powerful organizations. His message resonated: compliance should not be blind, and rights must be defended carefully but firmly. The community, once subdued by covert threats, started holding open meetings, establishing independent oversight, and rewriting bylaws to prevent future abuses. James returned to his normal routines, mowing the lawn, managing his IT clients, and enjoying quiet evenings with his wife, but he carried a renewed sense of empowerment. He had turned a moment of fear into an opportunity for systemic change, demonstrating that courage, intelligence, and patience could dismantle even the most audacious attempts at intimidation. More importantly, he had shown that ordinary citizens, when prepared and informed, could hold those in power accountable without resorting to violence or rash decisions. James, reflecting on the experience, understood that the real victory lay not in legal triumph or media attention, but in restoring balance and justice to a community that had been quietly manipulated. In the end, his careful vigilance and unwavering adherence to the law ensured that intimidation could not survive the light of transparency, and that ordinary people could indeed prevail against extraordinary challenges.